Experience. In the next half hour, we'll be discussing an often controversial labor law that is being considered in Minnesota and in other states around the country. The bill is called Right to Work by its supporters. It's already in the Minnesota State Legislature, both as a bill and as an amendment. Joining us today to explore this subject are Professor John Remington of the Center for Human Resources and Labor Studies of the University of Minnesota, and Bernie Hesse, Director of Special Projects for UFCW, the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 1189. Okay, gentlemen, welcome to Voices of Experience.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. It's nice to be here.
Okay, let's start with the purpose of the law. What does it purport to do? Bernie?
Well, as it was introduced, it's in a number of ways, shapes, and forms. There's a constitutional amendment that's being proposed. It hasn't been heard yet. There was also, over the years, it's been introduced in different shapes. Well, what it does is it restricts the ability for a union to have total membership when you have a shop, and I'll explain it this way. When you negotiate a contract, when you bargain with an employer, you usually negotiate a union security clause. And what that is, it usually requires union membership after so many days that a worker has been there. If the worker, and this is one thing that's not being brought out in the discussion, if a worker decides that he doesn't want to become a member of that union, he can opt out, but he has to pay a service fee because we're still required under the National Labor Relations Act to represent him. The way the law is being rolled out, it's being put forward as a job creator or the Freedom to Work Act or a number of things. And we just think it's toxic to the workplace. It's misrepresenting what the National Labor Relations Act is currently at. And I'm sure John could give us a better history of it, but we just find that this is just another thing being pulled out of the anti-worker Rovian Grover Norquist toolbox to fool around with working people.
You mentioned people working at a job for a month or whatever the number of days is before being required to join a union by the local contract. I can recall 100 years ago or so, I was working in Chrysler Corporation on the line one summer, and I could work there for 30 days. And they wanted to make sure I could do the assembly line and also be happy in my job. And then I joined the UAW after that. So John, is this right to work? Is this a job creating?
Well, it's a horrible title to begin with, Dan, because there are no rights in the statute, and it has nothing to do with work. It has only
zero for two.
And it certainly has nothing to do with job creation. It's completely independent. The right to work will not create a single job. The problem is the title. The title, I think, is intentionally misleading to make people think that it has something to do about providing rights to workers in the employment market. And that's totally false. It only applies to collective bargaining. And all the law does is to prohibit companies and unions that want to from negotiating a union security clause. And that's it. That's the entirety of the act.
So it really has very little to do with the title.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
Terrible misnomer.
Does this right to work law help protect workers who may be fired?
No.
Is there any legal process?
There's no protections at all. There are no rights in the statute.
So there is no due process. You were deficient, and
absolutely
not. Took steps to correct your mistakes, and you didn't follow that. That's not
under U.S. law. Unless you have a collective bargaining agreement, you are an employee at will, and you may be disciplined or terminated for cause or for no cause at the discretion of the employer, unless there is a provision in the collective bargaining agreement that prohibits that.
So if you're an employee at will, when you come to work, you presumably have another 8 hours of employment.
Presumably.
Yeah, unless something happens at noon.
Yeah. Or sooner, and they send you home.
Yeah. Okay. Across the nation, Bertie, corporate CEOs spent more than $1 billion. That's with a B. More than $1 billion to elect members of the state legislature or Congress who share the agenda, which includes this alleged right-to-work laws. In early February of 2011, about the start of the second week in February, men and women in Minnesota started to push back on this. I'm referring specifically to the hearing on House File 292. Would you care to comment on that?
Great turnout. You know, it's often, I think, when you're faced with a challenge or some adversity that people step up. Hearing room was packed. Just about virtually every labor organization had representation there, rank and file members, staff, a number of people that are just supporters of workers in general. And people should view this whole thing as an attack on all workers, whether they belong to a union or not. And also I'm kind of surprised by a number of folks that do support this. To me, this is just more interference from the government in a relationship between an employer and workers. So I guess I understand, you know, as you try to figure out why this is being thrown at us, but it's just more attacks on workers to drive down our expectations, our ability to bargain good contracts.
With the great showing of the workers who were opposed to this, and I was there, and as you were, I know. You know, I started counting in the room how many people are standing. You know, and I got up to 60. All the seats were filled, and there were 60 people standing, and there was an overflow room. So, is the battle over, or will there be more tests?
Far from it. You know, the battle for the round one will be over May 23rd. I think when they're done with the session. But no, this thing will pop its head up in the form of maybe there'll be more deadlines were put out yesterday, but there'll be more laws introduced. One thing I've noticed with this session is the duplicity that's going on with a number of same bills with different authors being introduced. So far from over. This is going to roll into the summer. We've got a lot of work to do for the next couple of years. Yeah,
this is only 2011. We have 2012 too, you know, plus whatever else happens. John, proponents of these laws claim that they enable a more business-friendly environment with which to do business, and that leads to economic growth for states and their residents. Does that pan out?
Unfortunately, the evidence doesn't support that, Dan. There isn't any indication that, in fact, they lead to any economic development. On the contrary, workers, and this applies to all workers, not just unionized, but workers that live in right-to-work states have lower wages, they have lower benefit levels, and generally have fewer opportunities in terms of employment, the ability to be mobile and to move around.
So the business-friendly environment is connected to all kinds of other factors.
Well, it's connected to lower wages and lower benefits, and that certainly saves businesses money. So from that perspective, businesses like it because you know, it appears based on these right-to-work laws that perhaps that's a result. The problem is, I'm not sure right-to-work causes it so much as other repressive measures that are introduced in those states and a general anti-worker climate that prevails.
Then you have market forces for the product or service, the geographic location, the ability of to have a skilled workforce.
A wide variety of factors.
All kinds of factors are involved.
I think this is just part of a buffet of bad worker bills being rolled out. You're going to see an attack on funding for OSHA. You've got the right to work stuff that's been
occupational safety and health administration.
Yes. Okay. The folks that come in and do accident investigation, that walk through plants and do some advising on how to make operations more safer. a number of things. This is, like I said earlier, this is like a playbook on how we're going to attack worker rights. So you'll see less funding, or they're trying to dismantle under the thing of if we unfetter businesses, they'll be able to grow and thrive. And what it means sometimes is you'll have less safe workplaces, you'll have the diminished ability of unions to negotiate better contracts, wages, and that. And then I think just the whole idea of paying homage to the business sector without acknowledging the contributions that workers makes is just this repeating mantra they keep throwing out.
So who wins and who loses with right to work, John?
Well, workers generally lose because of wage loss and benefit losses, and a general downward impact on wages. I'm not sure who the winners are. It's pretty difficult to determine. I'm not sure that businesses win on this. Perhaps their wage bill goes down, but if you look at the right to work states, so does the general quality of the workers that they employ. I mean, obviously, every employer wants to hire the best and most qualified workers are available. And it seems that the labor pool in right to work states is less well trained and less experienced.
I'm thinking of my own background from the auto industry and growing up in the city of Detroit. My grandfather worked at Ford, my father worked at Chrysler. Henry Ford knew that workers had to make enough money so they could afford to buy the cars. You know, and wages have to be good enough so that workers can contribute. You know.
And Henry Ford was certainly no friend of labor.
No,
but
no.
He understood that basic principle, and I think most business people do, which is why you don't see a great groundswell for these right-to-work proposals coming from business. It's more being driven by ideologues on the right who see this as symbolic, who would like to see, well, if Minnesota were to become a right-to-work state, we would be more appealing. Well, these are the same people that think South Dakota is more appealing in terms of a labor market.
Yeah. Okay. I want to use a sports analogy now. Basketball has been thrown at a basket, and it goes off the backboard. And you have two people going for the ball. One is a corporate CEO, and one is a worker, and they're jostling each other for a position, and they're trying to get at the ball, and someone is maybe thrown off balance in that jostling process. So what happens to the player who is representing workers if he's thrown off balance and is pushed down by the player representing corporate CEO?
It's just like
who's going to win? Who's going to get
when
that ball?
When a person's fault or a person's held back or a number of these things is, look, the balance is, we would argue, has been out of whack for years already. This would just add to it. What the average CEO makes now compared to workers is just the whole thing around greed in that. And I believe that we've got to start. We have to move. This is almost a time where we've got to really energize and mobilize for organizing all workers and fight